Donal is a middle-aged man who lives on a farm where he takes care of his elderly mother, Florence, and earns a living by fixing cars. He also hunts for food in the nearby forest. One day, a man comes to buy a car from Donal, but instead of paying full money, he offers a half-working RV and $200 instead, which Donal accepts. After the deal, the man advises Donal to let go of his boring routine and enjoy life more. At night, Donal watches TV while his mother reads the newspaper and discovers that her old friend has passed away. She becomes emotional as everyone her age is dying, and Donal offers to stay with her as a form of comfort. However, Florence insists that he should go out and enjoy the evening. Donal heads to a local bar and starts a conversation with a bartender named Liz. She suggests he should bring his mother to the bar sometime, and Donal tries to ask her out, but their conversation is interrupted when a disturbance occurs. Liz goes to handle the situation, but one of the young men at a nearby table tries to touch her inappropriately. Donal intervenes and stops the young man, who taunts him for living with his mom at his age. Just as tensions rise, Liz swiftly kicks the troublemaker out of the bar, and Donal pays for the drinks and leaves. Donal returns to his garage and starts working on the van. The next morning, he excitedly takes Florence to see the car and suggests they go to Montague Beach. However, she refuses and scolds him for spending so much time on cars before leaving in frustration. Feeling downcast, Donal lies in the van for a while. Suddenly, Florence returns with some beer and tells him that she wouldn't mind if he went on a trip without her. Donal starts drinking the beers and eventually falls asleep in the van. In his sleep, he dreams of Florence appearing, asking for help. This dream jolts him awake, and he rushes back to the house. Upon his return, he witnesses a man getting into a car and driving away from his house. When he enters the house, he discovers Florence shot dead. In a panic, he calls for emergency assistance, and the police arrive to interview him. Donal shares information about the light-haired boy he saw getting into the car. A few days later, Florence's funeral occurs, attended by her friends and others, including Donna's uncle, Eamon. Some days later, while Donal is on the farm feeding the chickens, he notices a car in the driveway of his house, but it quickly speeds away as soon as Donal notices it. One night, while cleaning his mother's room, Donal finds an envelope containing money and a picture hidden under the mattress. Suddenly, he hears a noise from the shed and rushes with his shotgun. However, he's outnumbered by two masked men who force him to drop the shotgun and attempt to stage his murder as a suicide. Due to their amateurish attempts, Donal manages to regain control and kill one of the men. He unmasks the other, Bartosz, and questions him about why they were sent there, but Bartosz claims not to have any information. Donal contemplates calling the police but decides against it. Instead, he instructs Bartosz to call his boss and inform him they have completed the job. The boss arranges a meeting at a bar for the following day. Donal repairs the car that the murderers arrived in, buries the man he killed, and then packs his belongings, including his shotgun. He takes Bartosz hostage in his RV and starts driving. After some time, he pulls over and begins interrogating Bartosz about the identity of Florence's killer. Bartosz insists he doesn't know and reveals that the gangsters have kidnapped his sister, Karja, as leverage, leaving him no choice but to follow their orders. He further adds that the gang has many girls held hostage, and Donal asks Bartosz to join his side. Upon reaching the meeting spot, they see Karja entering the building. Bartosz enters the building and encounters Gavigan and Jerome, who question the evidence of the completed deal. Bartosz insists the evidence is on the other man's phone and just wants to see his sister. However, they deny her presence in the building. Bartosz argues that he saw her come in. So, Jerome brings in another hostage, Sophia, instead. Gavigan brutally kills Sophia with a hammer, teaching Bartosz a lesson about what they do with people who betray them. Seizing an opportunity, as Jerome goes to dispose of Sophia's body, Donal locks Jerome in the room and confronts Gavigan at gunpoint, forcing him into the van, believing that Gavigan might have information about his mother's murderer. Donal drives deep into the forest, stops the car, prepares a meal for himself and Bartosz, and then continues to press Gavigan for information about Florence's murder, torturing him with a hot pot when he refuses to talk. After enduring the pain, Gavigan finally reveals that he was ordered to carry out the hit by Trevor, who is frequently seen with their boss, Frankie. Donal tries to understand why they killed Florence, but Gavigan is clueless about the motive. Donal steps away to relieve himself, instructing Bartosz to watch over Gavigan. However, Bartosz fails to do so, and Gavigan escapes. Gavagon frees his hands during his flight by rubbing the rope against a tree's bark and quickly calls Trevor, informing him of the deal and his pursuit by Donal. Frankie, who is with Trevor, intervenes, asking how the situation went bad, and Gavagon apologizes to Frankie for the mess. As Donal and Bartosz chase after Gavagon, Gavagon gains the upper hand, overpowering Bartosz and beating him while threatening that Karja will suffer now because of him. Just as Gavagon is about to deliver a fatal blow to Bartosz with a rock, Donal intervenes, distracting Gavagon. Bartosz seizes the opportunity and uses a knife to stab Gavagon. Gavagon pleads for them to take him to a hospital and, in his final moments, reveals that Karja is known by the codename Alicia. Before Donal can offer any help, Gavagon passes away. Frankie goes to the bar and instructs Jerome to find Bartosz's sister, emphasizing that she should be punished, and tasks Trevor with dealing with Donal. Meanwhile, as Donal and Bartosz bury Gavagon, Gavagon's phone rings, and Donal answers it. It's Frankie on the other end, proposing a resolution to their conflict, but Donal seizes the opportunity to ask her why she killed Florence. Frankie cryptically responds that his mother wasn't as innocent as she appeared, and abruptly ends the call. Donal decides to seek answers from Eamon, showing him the picture he found under Florence's mattress. Eamon identifies the people in the photograph as Joe, a close friend of Florence, and Joe's daughter, Frankie. He explains that Joe had gotten mixed up with dangerous individuals, and Florence had hidden him in her caravan at Montague Beach. However, they eventually discovered his location and killed him, so Florence took Donal to the countryside to protect him from these dangerous people. Returning to the van, Donal instructs Bartosz to look up Joe Pierce online. They come across an article reporting the recent death of former Commander Leo, who had faced charges of murdering political figures, including Joe Pierce. Bartosz is adamant about finding his sister first, believing she holds vital information about Frankie's address and activities, especially since she may have been forced to work for special guests at her home. They contacted the number they obtained from Gavagon and scheduled an appointment with Alicia at 6 o'clock. On the other side, Jerome successfully locates Karja, while Trevor informs Frankie that he's coming to pick her up and they're heading to Karja. At 6 o'clock, Donal dresses in a suit and arrives at the designated location. He tells Karja that Bartosz is with him and urges her to leave. Initially frightened, Karja hesitates, so Donal calls Bartosz so they can talk. Together, they quickly formulate a plan, and Karja starts screaming for help, drawing the attention of Albert, the security person. In a swift move, Donal strikes Albert with an iron object, rendering him unconscious. When he gains consciousness, Donal uses Albert to extract information about Frankie's address and tortures him. Meanwhile, Bartosz, sitting in the RV, notices Jerome entering the house. Concerned, he attempts to call Donal, but Donal doesn't answer. As Donal and Karja are about to leave, Jerome appears and launches an attack on Donal. A brutal fight starts, with Jerome inflicting severe injuries on Donal. Just as things seem serious for Donal, Karja returns and shoots Jerome with the gun he had dropped, saving Donal from further harm. Karja takes Donal to the caravan, where Bartosz helps him get in the car, and then Bartosz and Karja share a warm embrace. They settle inside the vehicle and quickly drive away from the scene. When Frankie and Trevor eventually arrive at the location, they discover Jerome dead and Albert bound. Frankie questions Albert whether he gave away any information, and Albert insists on his loyalty. However, Frankie mercilessly uses the iron to kill Albert. Donal experiences another dream of Florence, this time seeing her vacuuming a specific area in the forest. He awakens in the caravan and finds Karja and Bartosz engaged in conversation. Donal confronts Bartosz for lying about Karja's involvement with Frankie's home. Donal reveals that he has an address for where Trevor works. Karja expresses her desire to help Donal, acknowledging that her escape from the gang wouldn't have been possible without his intervention. They set off in the caravan and stop outside Trevor's workplace. Karja questions if Donal was close with Florence, and he affirms it. He tells her that Frankie killed Florence because she thinks his mother was involved in Joe's death. Karja shares her story, revealing that she had a large family in Poland but sought freedom and escaped to London. Unfortunately, she was kidnapped by the gang from the streets one day. As Trevor starts his car, they follow him and notice him stopping in front of a house, where Frankie emerges to meet him. Donal prepares to leave and confront them with his shotgun, but Bartosz advises him to wait as they observe a child next to Frankie and decide to return later when the child is asleep. As they go to the caravan park for the night, They encounter a man waiting with a gun for them. In a swift decision, they quickly head to Eamon's place. Bartosz tells Donal that he doesn't know the full story and suggests that Florence might not be innocent. This statement infuriates Donal, leading to a heated argument between him and Bartosz, which Karja intervenes to stop. Bartosz expresses his desire to leave, and Donal questions Karja about whose side she's on, and she emphasizes that Frankie's child changes the situation. In response, Donal pulls over on the side of the road in the middle of the night and instructs Bartosz and Karja to get out of his car. He provides them money for flights to Poland and passports before driving away. Meanwhile, Frankie receives a call from the man she sent to the caravan park, who reports that he spotted Donal but lost him and is now searching. Frankie becomes furious with Trevor, blaming him for not caring for Donal. Trevor defends himself, stating that it's not his area of expertise, but Frankie insists everything is his area because she pays him. In response, Trevor corrects her, reminding her that she pays him for advice and that he has advised against killing Florence. Frankie promptly fires Trevor, and as soon as he leaves, she calls another of her men, Vivian, instructing him to come pick her up as she knows where Donal will be going. Donal arrives at Eamon's house to find Eamon severely injured. He contemplates calling an ambulance, but Eamon stops him and tells him to abandon his revenge. Eamon reveals that Florence had an affair with Joe, and when Joe's safety was threatened, she provided information about him to Leo, which leads to Frankie seeking revenge, much like Donal's current situation. Tragically, Eamon passes away, and Donal, devastated by the news, looks out the window and spots Frankie's car parked nearby. Frankie instructs Vivian to shoot Donal immediately upon sight, without attempting to engage in conversation, as she fears Donal might overpower him. Vivian enters the house and discovers Eamon's lifeless body, which Donal uses as a distraction to strike him and make him unconscious. Frankie waits in the car but rushes inside when Vivian doesn't return on time, only to have Donal point a gun at her head and disarm her. He forces her to follow him to the car and orders her to drive. Meanwhile, Bartosz becomes increasingly restless and decides to help Donal. He arrives at Eamon's place, where Vivian has regained consciousness, and informs Trevor that Donal has taken Frankie with him. Trevor corners Bartosz and uses him to call Donal. Donal takes Frankie to Montague Beach, where he traps her and confronts her with the truth that everything her mother did was to protect him. Frankie reveals that she visited Leo in the hospital, and he told her that when he arrived at the beach, Joe had been shot in the jaw by someone, and the police suspected Leo. Donal keeps urging her to move closer to the grave he has dug near the shore and tells her that Leo lied to her. Frankie admits that she had similar suspicions and went to see Florence. In a flashback, Frankie recalls questioning Florence about whom she had called to have Joe killed. Florence professed her love for Joe and insisted she would never do such a thing. When Frankie grabbed Florence's collar, she revealed that Joe had decided to stop cheating on his family and leave her, so to prevent him from leaving, she took his gun and accidentally shot him. Florence had called Leo and the police because she couldn't go to jail, fearing Donal would be left without anyone to care for him. Frankie tells Donal that she was only 5 years old when her father was killed, and now he is about to do the same to her 5-year-old daughter, orphaning her. Donal, taking pity on her, decides it's the end of their ordeal and begins to walk away. However, Frankie grabs a shovel and strikes Donal with it before quickly freeing herself from the handcuffs. She grabs her gun, and Donal, wounded but determined, retrieves his gun and shoots Frankie just as she is about to kill him. Trevor calls from Bartosz's phone, and Donal informs him it's all over. He asks about Bartosz's whereabouts, and Trevor tells him there is no room for negotiation with Frankie dead. Trevor loads his gun and shoots Bartosz dead. He then takes the phone and invites Donal to come to Eamon's place for revenge. Donal gets overwhelmed by shock and anger as he sits on the beach.